Okay, so let's kick off to see what's our next MP.
Tēnā hoki koe, tēnā koe e te māngai, a tēnā tātou katoa e te whare. It's probably less of a pleasure and more of a duty to stand and bring a particular angle to this discussion and to this bill. To say that Pāti Māori, we'll support it to Select Committee with the conditions which I'm going to express in my kōrero today, Mr. Speaker. So, having been a social worker and then a Care and Protection social worker in the time in which the Children and Young Persons and Their Families Act came to be. So, I've got some insight both clinically, culturally and technically in terms of how these bills and pieces of legislation and law come into action and don't always hit the mark, unfortunately, when it's on the ground. So, so that's a bit of the backdrop for my discussion. Weighing heavily on our collective Māori consciousness is the well-being of our mokopuna Māori. So it concerns me that 80% of children, all children abused in state care institutions are tamariki Māori. The time for action must be now, yet the actions we see from the coalition government tell a different story. This bill intends to improve oversight and monitoring of Oranga Tamariki, and we've heard all the technical bits how that's described, making structural changes to the Independent Children's Monitor. If government is truly committed to structural changes, and it is actually sincere about the care and protection of mokopuna Māori, this seems to me tinkering at the edges yet again. This bill, this idea, this insight behind it all. And here's part of why I'm talking like this. So there's the tinkering on the edges, but then there's the 7AA deal, which ironically, if this is about monitoring and taking care of and keeping an eye on all New Zealand mokopuna children, right, yet to take away, to dismantle a cultural paradigm, a clinical paradigm under 7AA, which is now dismissed. It's off the books. We will treat you just like any other children, any other child, any other New Zealander. You see the difficulty that we have as a party with that is that, again, it does not at all really deal with structural change in any real significant way, Mr. Speaker. And so we want this to go to Select Committee. We want to listen to the stories that are bound to come through. But again, it just feels another piece of tinkering on the edges, and over here dismantling of Section 7AA, tinkering on the edges and reintroducing boot camps, tinkering on the edges and then coming back to the potential abuse in custody with a military-style model. Why do I know this? Because my memory working in the field tells me this. Despite the reassurances or the comments from the Minister, I'm not confident at all, and many of us are not. And on the 19th, I think we'll get to see that a little bit more closely outside on the grounds. Seeking to improve oversight and monitoring of Oranga Tamariki through the re-establishment of an independent children's monitoring board is a minor structural improvement. The independent authority would see the return of tamariki and mokopuna Māori. So, coming to what we would replace it with, or we would ask the House to consider, is the our mokopuna Māori authority. This independent authority would see the return of tamariki and mokopuna Māori from state care back into the rightful care of te iwi Māori. And I heard the Minister refer to as Section 396. Again, an attempt back in the 1989, 1990s, I used to approve 396s. I think over the whole time I was in the department, I maybe did 3 or 4. The idea is good, but the implementation and the practice is hopeless. And I'm interested to see whether that's going to be any different this time. I fear it won't. The mokopuna authority would both assert and protect the rights of our people promised in Te Hakaputunga and Te Titio Waitangi. It will be the primary national agency that prioritises whakapapa because whānau do know what's best for their own. Whānau order is a perfect expression of that. Whānau order is by Māori, for Māori, and I see I've run out of time. What a shame. Tēnā tātou.
Joseph Mooney.
Well, it's interesting to hear some insight knowledge from a then social worker who's worked under the multiple different acts, now an MP.
I think it's very interesting that there's only one type of boot camp. She makes a very good point about boot camps, but I also think, there's only one type of boot camps that have ever worked around the world, and that's the voluntary ones where people are have been chosen to go into those boot camps voluntarily. This is not that legislation. This is not where the boot camps are voluntary, and every single time a boot camp has been tried, it's been forced, it has failed. And this isn't just around the world. This is in New Zealand. It's been tried a couple of times before this. And look at the big abuse and state care report that's come out about it, right? And this government isn't learning from the mistake. And I think they can apologise and they can say they're doing this and they can talk about it. But there's a very big difference between talking and the actions that they're going to do. And there's a very stark difference there. And I think they're confined by the coalition agreement to some extent. I think some people do want to actually move forward and move past the abuse and state care. I think Erica Stanford, handling the apology, I think she's a minister who's actually pretty good. You're right. But I think
I completely agree as well. She wasn't just shout, shout, shout when she was in opposition. She's now actually proven herself to deliver.
Yeah, and I think there's certain parties. I think I'm not sure which party it was, but that wanted boot camps back and wanted.
I think it was New Zealand First as well as National. It was a bit more than just one party.
Oh, okay.
Because it is seen as that.
Well, ACT as well. I'm pretty sure ACT during the election campaign came out with a, we'll bring it back.
Yeah. It seems to be the only thing that all three parties can agree on in this coalition. But I think that there are some ministers here who would like to actually move forward, who would like to, move past this boot camp era. But there are also some very conservative people in this government as well who would like to bring that back. And I think you're seeing some of the ministers who want to move forward apologising, coming out against it, but they can't really do anything because it's in the coalition agreement.
Yeah.
One of the things I found really interesting actually around all of these debates is there's a lot of talk about how it's going to impact Māori mokopuna, for example. Nobody's mentioned the fact that they want to take out mention of the treaty from the Oranga Tamariki Act, because it's one of 28 acts that the government's looking at removing any reference to our founding document from.
Yeah.
But it's a relatively new act, so it's not like it was just thrown in to go, we should do what we can to recognise it. It would have been built in there with a reason, and no party has brought that up in this debate yet. And it will clearly impact certain groups in society more than others. So it's probably something that they should be looking at, which might be something that they nut out during the select committee process. But surprised I haven't heard about it tonight.
I think there's also, I think it's also been, the Treaty Principles Bill has been, looked at, and as much as I think that's very important to talk about, I think they're kind of trying to use that as a distraction for a lot of other policies that they want to strip the treaty from, and a lot of people are focused on the Principles Bill, but they've used that purposely to ensure that people aren't looking at the other ways they're trying to get rid of the treaty and other government legislation.